Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack make it backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the vital speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby May. Just caught a touchdown from the bay.
And Lord knows, Tommy had loyalty and soul. Helicopters, Rolls Royces with Louis Vuitton interior. May sound like I'm fantasizing, but son, I'm dead serious. Montana was no dummy, bought Bennett's to wash the money. Had money out the ass, he politic like the Asians. Feds couldn't catch him dirty, so shut up for tax.
Honestly, must design me something Tommy Montana from Queens had before the night call. What could represent me? Too godly to be a Bugatti. You honestly must design me something Tommy Montana from Queens.
My friends, the streets of America do not belong to drug peddlers and crack gangs. They belong to us, and we're going to take them back.
But in South Jamaica, the rhetoric is drowned out by another reality.
Where the other guy go?
He went around the corner.
For 2 years, the neighborhood has been the target of a special drug crackdown program ordered by the New York City Police Department. Murders here still rose by more than 30% last year.
An increase blamed on crack.
The newest and one of the deadliest drugs sweeping the country today is crack.
A potent, inexpensive, highly addictive form of cocaine. Much of the nation's crack problem is concentrated in New York. Local officials call it an epidemic.
In New York, the drug problem is epidemic. City officials say cocaine arrests are up 60% over last year. Watching a buy is easy.
He just had another sale right there.
There are so many people awaiting trial and so many who have been convicted on drug charges that New York's mayor has proposed building 2 so-called prison camps. Camps that could house up to 10,000 people.
It is an all-out city war, but especially concentrated in these areas. Washington Heights, Harlem, East Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, Jamaica, Queens, and South Ozone Park, Queens. This has reached epidemic proportions. It is a crack epidemic, which police say is causing an increase in murder and other violent crime.
This is a 357, do a lot of damage. He's supposed to point through the vest? These bullets go right through a police officer's vest.
In almost any corner, you can find business going on. Here's something changing hands. And here. And here in broad daylight, the boy goes to a hiding place, gets out his merchandise, hands something over to this man. And again here. And the teenage businessman counts a roll of bills. In South Jamaica, you don't have to be an adult to work in the drug trade.
And you didn't even have to be 25 to be a millionaire. The Wednesday, May 11th, 1988 front page of the New York Newsday will read, "Drug whiz kid nabbed by the feds." During the mid to late 1980s in Queens, it's like kingpins were being born every day. But you're going to have to search far and wide to find one that would amass more from their ill-gotten gains than Tony Montana, or Tommy Montana Mickens. Hey, what up though? Shay's Popalot. Salute the almighty mob. Y'all go ahead and meet us in Laurelton. Matter of fact, y'all just meet us on Merrick Boulevard. Tommy just bought the whole thing. Now, we all heard the stories about how Fat Cat got it, and Supreme and the Supreme team would dominate, and Pappy Mason and the Bebos would terrorize Queens. But a person that is not brought up enough when they talk about the who's of who was getting it during that time in the city is going to be none other than Tommy Mickens. By the time the feds would be able to pick him up in 1988, he would amass a fleet of luxury vehicles, properties, a yacht that would be docked in California, and even allegedly a helicopter. And though Tommy would drop out, you could tell that he was intelligent and he seemed like a numbers guy. Sergeant Michael McGinnis of the Queens Narcotic Division would say that he probably did the best job of all the dealers out there of getting his money into legitimate businesses, even saying that Tommy was a smart kid. And he probably picked a lot of that up from his father, Tommy Harris, who was a policymaker or a number runner in Queens, which was something like the ghetto's makeshift lottery. And though I know drugs has been around since the beginning of time, and some people that's in the hoods hustling now, it's probably like the people in the game's primary source of income. I know people making money off pimping, people making money off scamming and different things. But the drug game is just entrenched in most urban cities and have been feeding people's families for years. But it was not always that way. In the 1950s, the 1960s, and even up to a certain point, I want to say in the 1970s, the primary income in the ghetto was probably running numbers or policy making. And Tommy's pops was a player in that game. Now, how big a player would be a big deal in his narcotics trial towards the end of the 1980s. Like most hustlers, Tommy probably got his first taste of hustling, selling weed, but by the time he was 19, he would move on to cocaine. And in October of 1982, he would be arrested when he would sell a half ounce of coke to an undercover detective. He would receive a 1 to 3 year charge for that case. But what that immediately tells me was he was definitely a somebody in the game, because this was before the emergence of crack, and the price of cocaine per gram at that time, or per kilo at that time, was just sky high. And not only that, the people in the ghettos wasn't the people buying that. If you ever heard anybody speak on the history of coke or the rise of its use in the United States, you would hear them probably say that at first it was an upscale drug. People like doctors and lawyers and people along those professional lines was using it because the price was so high. It was not until it was converted into crack to where it was affordable enough to be sold in these ghettos in certain neighborhoods. Robert Russell, the detective that would make the buy and bust of Tommy in October of 1982, would recall him as a clean-cut, passionate, almost charming young man, unlike many dealers he had encountered, saying, quote, he didn't really smell of the streets. During the early years of the game, people would talk about stories about going into car dealerships with shoe boxes of money or pocketfuls of money and driving off the lot with Benzes. But that would all change on January 1st, 1985, when the IRS began to require reporting of cash transactions over $10,000. And this is where Tommy would prove smarter than other dealers, but would ultimately be his downfall. Because according to the New York Times, he would begin to use a tactic that the IRS would begin to know as smurfing, the practice of breaking up large cash transactions into smaller ones, where usually payments were made using cashier checks or money orders for less than $10,000. And during his trial, they would say that even before his parole in June of 1984, from that 1 to 3 that he would catch, that he would begin a spending spree that would characterize his next 4 years. Someone would testify at his trial that in May of 1984, while he was still in a work release program, he would pay $28,146 cash for a 1985 Cadillac Fleetwood. Just 2 months later, in July of 1984, he would buy a 1984 BMW straight cash. And that would only be the beginning, because over the next 4 years, he would buy at least 18 more cars that included Jeeps, BMWs, Porsches, Saabs, 2 Mercedes-Benz, a Ferrari, a Jaguar, and even a Rolls-Royce that 50 would infamously rap had Louis Vuitton interior. Not to mention the Bayliner yacht that he would buy for more than $141,000, along with the 20 pieces of property, which they allege he paid $1.6 million for. Now, you know it's crazy when almost every article covering him has more people from the IRS speaking than the federal government. And towards the end of his run, it seems like Tommy even got smarter, because on February 1987, he would buy a piece of property at 159-21 Grand Central Parkway in Queens for $184,000. The seller of the property would agree to accept $69,000 of that payment in cash and agree to a list the official sale price on the closing documents at around $116,000. Though the transaction was not illegal, an IRS agent would state that buying structure would allow Tommy to turn the cash into equity on the home. Even if he was to sell the house for exactly what he paid, he would have recouped that $69,000, and it would give him a perfect explanation for the authorities and the IRS on how he received it. It would literally be clean money. The downfall would pretty much occur on February 6, 1987, when a New Jersey trooper would pull over a 560 SEL Mercedes-Benz that was going 80 miles per hour in a 50 mile per hour zone. At the wheel of the Mercedes-Benz was Tommy Mickens' alleged lieutenant, a guy by the name of Anthony Jacobs, along with Tommy Mickens in the passenger seat. There were no occupants in the backseat of the Benz, but it did have a bag that contained $15,175 in small bills, on which drug-sniffing dogs would find residue of cocaine. Tommy, playing it smart, he would say that the car belonged to his aunt and that the $15,000 in the back was to pay off the remaining balance on it. But that would only begin a landslide, because once they would investigate that car and certain other cars registered to that property and the dealer that sold the car, he would admit that Tommy would come in with a shopping bag of money paying for the vehicles. At the age of 26, Tommy would be sentenced to 35 years in federal prison on drug, tax evasion, and money laundering charges. He would serve 20 years of that 35-year stint, being released in 2008, going on to start the Tommy Experience after going on to own Montana Dry Cleaners, Montana Sporting Goods, and Montana Grocery during his time in the game. It would be his first non-Montana business and would be dubbed as a premier health, exercise, and wellness program targeted to, seems like, senior citizens. Daphne Avery, one of his 73-year-old clients, would go on to say that he's our pride and joy, while absolutely being unbothered by the news that Tommy was once a coke kingpin. Once you go through these stories enough, the good guys do win in the end sometimes. Y'all make sure y'all hit the red bell and subscribe button right under this video so y'all know when this real trill spill shit is dropping. Y'all get in the comment box below. Y'all run it up. Y'all let me know who's on y'all Queens Mount Rushmore of the streets. Y'all definitely hit me directly. Instagram, Twitter, POP_A_LOT. And until I get back, y'all know the rules. It's Shades Popalot. Salute the almighty mob.